Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, it touches so many lives, yet often starts with this uh, frustrating lack of clarity. Thyroid disorders, or as our source material calls them, Schilddrüsenunterfunktion and Schilddrüsenüberfunktion.
Right. We've got some really interesting material here that shines a light on why figuring out thyroid issues can feel like, well, like a real quest for you.
Yeah, and more importantly, what happens when this really crucial gland goes off track?
That's exactly it. For many people, the initial symptoms of a thyroid problem are kind of vague, easily blamed on other things.
Like fatigue, mood swings.
Exactly. It's not always a straightforward picture at first. And then, once a thyroid issue is found, the next big question you probably have is why?
Why is my thyroid acting up?
Precisely. And that why is what we're really digging into today.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Our sources make it super clear. The thyroid, this relatively small gland, it's an absolute powerhouse.
It really is.
We're talking control center for your metabolism, regulating energy, heart rate, body temp.
Even how much oxygen your cells take in, nerve and muscle responsiveness. It's fundamental.
Just keeping you going day to day.
Absolutely. And it's not just the daily stuff. It's critical for development, too.
Right. The material highlights growth, even intelligence.
Yeah. And the historical angle is quite striking. The severe impact hypothyroidism used to have on kids' physical and cognitive development before we understood it better.
It really underscores how vital this gland is right from the start for all of us.
Definitely.
What's also really interesting is how it doesn't work alone. There's this complex relationship with the pituitary gland, the hypophysis. Can you walk us through that interplay a bit? Why does this system sometimes get disrupted for you?
Sure. So think of the pituitary gland as like the brain's manager overseeing the thyroid.
Yeah.
When your thyroid hormone levels, that's mainly T3, the active one, and T4, the stored form when they dip too low, the pituitary releases TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone.
Got it. TSH.
Right. And that TSH tells the thyroid, hey, make more T3 and T4.
And if levels are too high?
Then the pituitary cuts back on the TSH, tells the thyroid to slow down production. It's a classic feedback loop designed for balance in your body.
So it's like a thermostat for your metabolism.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
Too low, pituitary turns up to heat the thyroid. Too high, it tells to cool off.
Exactly. And you can see how sensitive that system must be. Little disruptions can cause big problems.
Which is where the disorders come in.
That's right. When that balance gets thrown off, you see things like hyperthyroidism, too much hormone, hypothyroidism, too little.
And also goiter. And thyroiditis.
Yep, goiter, which is the enlarged gland itself, and thyroiditis, inflammation of the thyroid tissue. Each one, as our material points out, significantly impacts your well-being.
Big time. Wide-ranging symptoms affecting mood, energy, physical stuff.
Everything, yeah. So understanding this balance is key for your health.
Okay, let's dive into the first one then. Hypothyroidism. Schilddrüsenunterfunktion. The underactive thyroid. Sounds like this is pretty common, something many listeners might be dealing with.
It is very common. Hypothyroidism just means the thyroid isn't making enough T3 and T4 for what your body needs.
And it's not just one cause, right?
No, not at all. The sources break it down neatly into three main types based on where the problem starts: primary, secondary, and tertiary.
Okay, let's take primary first. That sounds like the problem's directly with the thyroid gland itself.
Exactly. That's the most common scenario. The issue is right there in the thyroid.
And why might that happen to you?
Well, a few key reasons mentioned. It can be congenital, so someone's born with a thyroid that's missing or didn't develop properly, or it's acquired later. And the biggest cause worldwide for that is iodine deficiency.
Ah, iodine. Makes sense. Needed for the hormones.
Right. And that deficiency can also cause that visible swelling, the goiter, as the gland works over time trying to capture iodine.
That used to be really common in some places, didn't it? Before iodized salt.
Huge difference, yeah. Shows how critical one nutrient can be for your thyroid.
What else can trigger primary hypothyroidism that you should know about?
Well, the source also notes that if someone was treated for hyperthyroidism, sometimes the medication can overshoot, pushing them into an underactive state.
Oh, right.
And also, chronic inflammation of the thyroid can damage it over time, reducing its hormone output.
Okay. Then there's secondary hypothyroidism, pituitary gland issue.
Correct. In secondary, the thyroid gland itself is actually okay, it can make hormones,
Well,
but the problem is higher up. The pituitary isn't sending out enough TSH, that signal hormone.
so the thyroid never gets the message to work harder for you.
Exactly. The material does say secondary is pretty rare, though, and sometimes harder to spot because the thyroid looks fine initially.
And then tertiary hypothyroidism, that involves the hypothalamus, even higher up.
Precisely. Tertiary is even rarer. Here, the hypothalamus, which kind of oversees the pituitary, isn't sending the first signal correctly.
So the whole chain reaction breaks down right at the start.
Yeah. The hypothalamus normally tells the pituitary to release TSH. If that initial step fails, the thyroid doesn't get the message it needs for your body.
Even if the thyroid and pituitary are perfectly healthy.
Right. The communication pathway is broken. These secondary and tertiary forms, while rare, really illustrate how complex that whole regulatory chain is.
Okay, that's a really clear breakdown of hypothyroidism. Now let's flip the coin. Hyperthyroidism, Childrew's function. Too much T3 and T4.
Right. Hyperthyroidism means excess thyroid hormone circulating in your system, and like hypokrut, it stems from different underlying conditions.
Okay.
The material focuses on 3 common ones. Morbus Basedow, which you probably know as Graves' disease, functional autonomy, or autonomous thyroid nodules, and Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Okay, morbus Basedow Graves' disease. That's autoimmune, isn't it?
It is. Graves is where your body makes antibodies, but instead of fighting germs, they mistakenly target the thyroid.
But how does that cause too much hormone?
Well, these specific antibodies actually mimic TSH. They latch onto the thyroid and constantly stimulate it, telling it make more, overriding the pituitary's control for you.
Wow. Okay.
And interestingly, in Graves's, other antibodies can also attack the thyroid tissue itself, causing inflammation.
And the source mentions key signs, goiter and...
And the protruding eyeballs, yeah, exophthalmos.
Yeah.
Quite characteristic.
Mostly memorable. Okay, what about functional autonomy? Autonomous nodules, parts of the thyroid going rogue.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. Certain areas within the thyroid start making hormones all by themselves, ignoring the TSH signals from the pituitary. They're autonomous.
Yeah, they're called hot nodules.
If they're the ones pumping out the extra hormones, yes, often called hot nodules. An interesting point the material makes is that these hot nodules, while causing hyperthyroidism symptoms for you, are very rarely cancerous.
Oh, that's good to know.
It contrasts with cold nodules, which don't produce much hormone, so they don't cause hyperthyroidism, but they have a slightly higher risk of malignancy.
So hot means hormonally active, not necessarily dangerous cancer-wise.
Exactly. Important distinction for you if you encounter those terms.
And the third one you mentioned, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I thought that caused hypothyroidism.
You're right. It usually ends up causing hypothyroidism, but it often starts differently, which can be confusing for you.
How so?
Hashimoto's is also autoimmune. The immune system attacks and destroys thyroid tissue.
Okay.
But initially, as those thyroid cells are damaged and break down, they release all the hormones they had stored inside.
So a sudden flood of hormones into your system.
Exactly. This can cause a temporary phase of hyperthyroidism. But as the destruction continues, the gland loses its ability to make enough hormone, leading eventually to the more common outcome, hypothyroidism.
So it can be a journey from hyper to hypo with Hashimoto's.
It often is. Starts hyper, ends hypo. It underlines the complexity.
Yeah, that's a really important nuance. Both Graves and Hashimoto's are autoimmune attacking the thyroid, but with different effects over time for you.
Precisely. And stepping back, looking at all these causes, our source highlights a common theme.
It should.
That the body's own regulatory capacity, its ability to keep the thyroid in check, has somehow been overwhelmed.
Which leads to the next obvious question, as the material asks. What kind of burdens could push your system over the edge like that?
Yeah.
What stresses the thyroid out for you?
Exactly. The source puts forward a pretty basic principle. A body that's well-nourished and not under excessive chronic stress should be able to maintain its balance, thyroid included.
So if things go wrong?
It suggests either the body is facing too much burden, or it's lacking essential resources, nutrients, or quite likely a mix of both.
Which naturally brings us to the second part of our deep dive. What can we actually do about it? How can we support our thyroid health? The material talks about ganzheitliche Maßnahmen, holistic approaches, suggesting we can play an active role.
It does. It emphasizes that the thyroid can actually be quite responsive to natural and holistic steps you can take. It lays out 9 key recommendations.
9. Okay, let's unpack those for our listeners. First up, vitalstoffreiche Ernährung, a nutrient-rich diet. Seems foundational.
Absolutely. The core idea is tackling any long-term nutritional gaps that might have built up in your body, weakening its ability to cope.
So focus on high-quality, whole foods.
Exactly. Nutrient-dense, maybe leaning towards alkaline-forming foods, giving your body the building blocks it needs to restore its own regulatory powers, thyroid included.
Makes total sense. Number 2, Darmsanira and gut health. How does that connect for you?
Well, a healthy gut is absolutely essential for absorbing all those vital nutrients from the good food you're eating.
Great.
If you're dealing with things like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, that can signal poor nutrient uptake in your gut.
So even if you eat well, you might not be getting the benefit if your digestion is off.
Precisely. So addressing gut health, maybe restoring a healthy gut microbiome, is seen as really important for your overall well-being and nutrient status.
Okay. Third one, entgifting. Detoxification. We hear that word a lot. What's the thyroid link you should be aware of?
The source points to potential interference from environmental toxins. Things like heavy metals, chemicals in food, maybe dental fillings, even clothing or cleaning products.
Wow, they can come from many places.
Yeah, you might be surprised. These substances could potentially disrupt the thyroid's delicate regulation in your body. So if chronic exposure is suspected, things like chlorella algae or bentonite clay are suggested to help bind and remove these toxins.
Interesting. Okay, number 4, antioxidants. Fighting free radicals.
Yep. Especially relevant if there's thyroid inflammation, like in thyroiditis.
Why is that?
Because inflammation itself generates free radicals. But if there are too many, they can actually make the inflammation worse and damage the thyroid further in your body.
And other things contribute to free radicals too.
Right. The source mentions heavy metals again, chemicals, food intolerances, even chronic stress can increase free radical load in your system.
So antioxidants help mop those up.
Exactly. They act like scavengers. So supplementing with things like astaxanthin, OPC, vitamin C might be helpful, particularly if inflammation is part of your thyroid picture.
Got it. Reducing that oxidative stress. 5th is omega-3 fetsorin, omega-3 fatty acids.
Yeah, the healthy fats, well known for being anti-inflammatory.
Good for your thyroid too then.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
The idea is to get enough anti-inflammatory omega-3s while also trying to reduce the pro-inflammatory omega-6s, which are often high in modern diets.
Finding that balance.
Right, balancing the fats to help lower overall inflammation in your body, which could benefit your thyroid.
Okay. Number 6, vitamin D. The sunshine vitamin.
Crucial for immune system regulation. It helps reduce those pro-inflammatory signals, the cytokines.
And the source links it specifically too.
Specifically mentions its importance in Hashimoto's, that autoimmune condition you might have, suggesting good vitamin D levels might help modulate that immune attack.
Interesting connection. Okay, number 7, Bewegung und Brustmassagen. Exercise and dry brushing. Sounds geared towards hypothyroidism.
Exactly. For an underactive thyroid, the goal is often to boost a sluggish metabolism, help with those symptoms you might feel.
So things that get you moving.
Right. Regular exercise, especially endurance stuff, plus stimulating things like contrast showers, hot and cold foot baths, dry brushing the skin, all aimed at improving circulation and metabolic rate in your body.
Stimulating the system. Okay, now number 8 is entspanning relaxation. But the suggestions here seem opposite cooling techniques for hyperthyroidism.
That's the key difference. With an overactive thyroid, you want to calm things down, manage symptoms like anxiety or rapid heart rate you might be experiencing.
So cooling helps.
Cooling and relaxation techniques can calm the nervous system, maybe even gently reduce thyroid hormone output. Things like treading water, cold compresses on the neck or calves, cool washes.
And calming herbs.
Yeah, valerian, lemon balm, hops. Also relaxing warm baths, meditation, Tai Chi, things that soothe your overactive system.
Completely different approach for hyper versus hypo. Calming versus stimulating.
Right, tailored to the specific imbalance.
And the final one, number 9, is fascinating. Seelische Konflikte lösen. Resolving emotional conflicts. How does that fit in for you?
This explores the potential mind-body link. It suggests psychological burdens, maybe unresolved issues or traumas, particularly from childhood related to growth and development, might actually manifest physically, potentially impacting thyroid function later in life.
Wow, so the thyroid's connection to development might be key there psychologically.
That's the idea presented. So the recommendation is exploring therapy to work through these deep-seated emotional issues.
with the possibility that resolving the emotional conflict could help the physical thyroid issue you're facing.
That's the potential link suggested. A powerful reminder of how connected our minds and bodies really are.
It really is. Our emotional state affecting our physical health right down to the thyroid.
Precisely. And wrapping up, the source really emphasizes that these thyroid disorders do affect quality of life and can increase risks for other problems for you. And it contrasts the standard medical path, often medication, sometimes surgery, with the potential for you to actively support your own thyroid health using these holistic ideas.
The core message seems to be lighten the load on your body.
Exactly. Reduce the burdens, nutritional gaps, toxins, inflammation, stress, emotional stuff.
And that frees up energy for your body's own healing and regulation systems, including the thyroid.
That's the hope. The source even hints that, for some people, with enough support, medication might eventually not be needed.
But these holistic steps are foundational, right? Not necessarily a replacement for medical care on their own.
Absolutely. Critical point. They are supportive measures for overall health.
And the source points listeners to find more specific info on hyper, Hashimoto's, maybe even diet stuff like a hormone diet. But it ends with a really crucial warning you need to hear.
A vital warning. It stresses seriously if you are taking thyroid medication, never stop or change your dose without talking to your doctor or a qualified practitioner.
Why is that so important?
Because stopping suddenly can cause potentially life-threatening symptoms for you. It's really dangerous. Any changes, like reducing meds, must be done gradually and under professional guidance.
Your safety comes first. Absolutely.
Paramount.
So, these holistic approaches offer great support for your well-being, but always integrate them wisely alongside your conventional medical care. Talk to your doctor.
Exactly. It's about teamwork for your health, a comprehensive approach.
This has been incredibly insightful, really digging into the thyroid's complexities and the ways you can potentially support it. It makes you think. Given how connected the thyroid is to diet, environment, emotions, what other subtle things in our daily lives might be influencing it in ways we haven't even considered for ourselves?
Definitely food for thought.
Something to explore further on your own. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.